Remember Beetlejuice. This is not the kind of movie you just throw on for atmosphere every Halloween season. This is the movie you go back to whenever you are worn out by hollow modern films. It has that very specific sense of humor from a time when Hollywood still had the nerve to throw money at ideas that were original and warped. You may still think Beetlejuice was just for kids, but that is only the paint on the surface. Under that paint is a film that is much stranger and much sicker than most people ever realized. A script so dark it made actors back away. The real origin of the fly-eating scene, and the ending we never got to see. In this video, we are going to pry open the strangest, most haunted, and most off-kilter corners of its history. These are the 20 weirdest things about Beetlejuice, and once you know them, you are never going to look at this movie the same way again. Number 20. Beetlejuice almost hit theaters with a disastrous title. Every time I think back on this, I still shiver in a way that is honestly kind of funny. A movie with a title as perfect as Beetlejuice almost got sent into theaters under the name House Ghosts. The second you hear it all, the magic just drains out. It does not suggest anything bizarre, it has none of that rebellious spirit, and it sounds more like a cheap television program than a movie. People would still be talking about decades later. Warner clearly wanted something safer, easier to understand, easier to sell. And that is exactly when Hollywood tends to do the thing Hollywood has always done so well: take something special and flatten it into something ordinary. But the strangest part is that Tim Burton tossed out another title as a joke scared sheetless. It was the kind of thing you blurt out just to vent. That is all it was. And then, the studio actually considered it. Burton was right to panic. Just reading that made me want to get up and walk around the room. Thank heaven and thank every guardian spirit of cinema that Beetlejuice did not have to spend its whole life under a title that sounds like a joke that died in a meeting room. And that is just the title. The part that really makes people pull back is what was waiting inside the script. You would never guess it. Number 19. This haunted script once made almost the whole cast back away. The movie audiences later held close like some odd little treasure from the late 80s once made the actors themselves look at it and take a step back. From the stories told later, Geena Davis was one of the very few who signed on fairly early. But Michael Keaton, Winona Ryder, Catherine O'Hara, and Sylvia Sidney did not rush into the project right away. One had to be reconnected through a manager. One Burton had to call and plead with. One he had to fly out and meet in person. Just that alone tells you that on the page, Beetlejuice must have felt more like a fever dream than a movie with promise. Is that not strange and fascinating? At the same time, the very thing that we as viewers came to love was the thing that first confused the people in the business. They were not wrong to find it hard to read. A filthy ghost. An afterlife that feels like an administrative nightmare. A tone that is funny and decayed at the same time. That does not sound like a formula for success at all. But that is the most beautiful question. Beetlejuice throws right in Hollywood's face how many movies got rejected simply because they were too strange for people to believe in. But honestly, I understand their reaction. I think you will too, once you hear the truth about that first draft. Number 18. The first draft of Beetlejuice was darker than most people can imagine. There is something I have always found haunting about classic films like this. Sometimes the version we love most is not the version they wrote first. With Beetlejuice, that is even more true. Because in Michael McDowell's original pages, this movie was much darker, much colder, and honestly far more frightening. Back then, Beetlejuice did not have that grubby, ridiculous, almost playfully diseased quality Michael Keaton later turned into an icon. He felt like something genuinely dangerous, a creature stepping out of some dark corner with no intention of entertaining anybody. Even Adam and Barbara's death was once far more gruesome. That tells me something very clearly. Beetlejuice did not begin as a stroll through dark comedy. It began as a nightmare and only later got reshaped, bent sideways, mixed with satire, mixed with farce, and mixed with Tim Burton's very specific rotten beauty. But what makes it work is that Burton did not erase that darkness. He left it underneath the laughter, like a thin layer of death, hanging over the whole film. Maybe that is why Beetlejuice has lasted so long. It is fun, but it never feels truly safe. And that uneasy feeling shows up even in the smallest, strangest details, details that still feel unsettling when you think back on them now. Let us go to number 17 and brace yourself. Number 17. Beetlejuice hides a creepy detail that nobody has ever fully explained. The first time I heard about this, I honestly had to replay the scene in my head. In that bizarre afterlife office where everything is already crooked and unpleasant enough, a loudspeaker suddenly announces a line that sounds harmless. At first, Flight 409, arriving at Gate 3. If you are not paying attention, it slips right by. But once you know that many people believe it refers to United Airlines Flight 409, the plane that crashed into a mountain in Wyoming in 1955 and killed everyone on board, passengers and crew alike, the whole scene changes temperature. It gets colder, harsher. What gives me chills is not just the number. It is the way the film drops it there and calmly keeps moving as if it owes nobody an explanation. No dramatic pause, no one turning to look, no music cue to warn you. Just a line over the speaker, and then it is gone. Old movies can be frightening in exactly that way. They do not need to shove fear in your face. They just place it quietly in the corner of the room, and years later, you still remember it. Number 16. Beetlejuice's demonic face was really shaped by Michael Keaton. There are characters whose face you remember before you even remember the lines. Beetlejuice is one of those. The hair standing up like he just climbed out of an electrical socket, the teeth so nasty you can practically smell them, the skin like he rotted somewhere for years before crawling back up to the surface. The funny thing is most of that horrible look was not something Michael Keaton simply put on. He practically rolled up his sleeves and helped build it. Once he got the part, Keaton did not sit around waiting for other people to decide what he should look like. He brought costume pieces home, sat down with V. Neil, and started figuring out what this guy ought to be. According to later accounts, Keaton himself wanted Beetlejuice to look moldy dirty, with hair like it had been electrocuted, and teeth that should not look like the teeth of any decent human being. Tim Burton added the striped suit, and from there, the whole thing locked into place like a lightning strike. Number 15. This movie was the first DVD Netflix ever shipped in 1998. Not an Oscar, not a box office number, not some chest-thumping Hollywood milestone. Just a very odd, very lovely marker, and somehow a very Beetlejuice one. In 1998, when Netflix was still just a service mailing DVDs to people, the very first disc they ever shipped out was Beetlejuice. Netflix themselves brought that up again during their 25th anniversary, and I have to say, hearing that just made me smile. Out of every movie they could have used to launch a brand new entertainment empire, they sent out a film about ghosts, waiting rooms for the dead, and a guy in a striped suit who looks like he just crawled out of a graveyard. It sounds wrong and right at the exact same time. I think anybody who lived through the era of DVD sleeves, the era of opening the mailbox and finding a movie waiting inside for you, will understand why this detail feels so charming. Beetlejuice never entered history through the front door. It never stood at attention waiting to be called important. It just kept slipping into American culture through the strangest side doors possible, and then stayed in people's memory for good. And honestly, if a revolution in home movie watching had to begin with one title, I am glad it was Beetlejuice. Right there on this movie's set, another beautiful private story was quietly beginning too. Number 14. Beetlejuice brought Catherine O'Hara together with her future husband in real life. I have always loved stories like this in the background of old movies. in the middle of all the grotesque makeup, all the warped sets, all the screaming, the lights, and the exhausting shooting schedule, something very gentle suddenly happened. While making Beetlejuice, Catherine O'Hara met her future husband, Beau Welch, the film's production designer. And what I love most is that the story does not sound glossy in that usual Hollywood way. It feels real, natural, accidental. According to Welch, it was Tim Burton himself who told him he ought to ask O'Hara out near the end of filming. It sounds like a little push from fate, except on that day, fate happened to be wearing Tim Burton's coat. And honestly, that has always felt like the best part of old Hollywood to me. Not just the films that lasted, but the lives that began there too. And speaking of Beetlejuice, even the title itself is messier than a romance that starts on a movie set. Let us go right to fact number 13. A strange number, and a story just as strange to go with it. Number 13. The name Beetlejuice was once a complete mess. Even this movie's title carries a very strange story with it. In one place, you will see Beetlejuice. Somewhere else it turns into Beetlejuice, split into two words. And then once the movie really entered public life, everything seemed to lock into Beetlejuice, as if that had always been the name from the beginning. But it had not. This title drifted through several different versions before becoming the one the whole world remembers today. And honestly, that feels more true to this film than any neat explanation ever could. A character who can be summoned just by saying his name 3 times, and yet his own name keeps shifting shape. That idea alone is strange enough. It makes Beetlejuice feel less like a normal character, and more like something always hovering between states half stable and half slipping away, as if he does not completely belong to any one world. Beetlejuice carries the feeling of the sky and myth. Beetlejuice sounds rough and odd. Beetlejuice is the version cinema finally settled on smoother, tighter, and weird in exactly the right proportion. Number 12. The origin of the scene where Beetlejuice eats the fly. Some scenes in movies last only a few seconds, but they carry exactly that sly old Hollywood spirit. The moment when Beetlejuice snaps up the fly is one of those. On the surface, it just looks like a nasty little gag that fits the character perfectly. But behind it is a very playful extra layer. That scene is often seen as a wink toward The Fly from 1958. When Beetlejuice catches the fly and pulls it down, the audience can hear the cry, "Help me, help me." Anybody who knows that older movie will catch immediately that the line is not there by accident. What I enjoy even more is that the connection feels even more fitting when you place it next to the cast of Beetlejuice. Geena Davis later became closely tied to The Fly from 1986, and Michael Keaton's name had also been mentioned around that project before the role went to someone else. So, all at once, one little fly crossing the screen ends up dragging a whole small corner of horror film history in with it. Number 11. Beetlejuice once had a completely different ending. Just imagine finishing Beetlejuice, but what lingers is not that wild, unruly aftertaste we remember now. There was once a very different ending. In that early version, Beetlejuice did not end as a filthy little demon grinning and slipping off the screen. He was exorcised. The Maitland's house was even shrunk down into a model, and Lydia was almost left behind with Adam and Barbara in a way that feels both sad and strange, as if the film were closing as a mournful ghost story instead of a blast of dark comedy. Those details show up in retrospective pieces about the film's early script and production draft. What fascinates me is not whether the old ending was better or worse. It is that, if you change just the last few minutes, the whole movie changes color instantly. The version we know still has ghosts, still has death hanging in the air, still has that decayed Tim Burton quality, but it also has a mischievous rhythm, a feeling that the movie is winking at the audience. That first ending sounds more sealed off, darker, and a little cold. It feels like a door slamming shut. so every time I think about it, I get the feeling I just caught a glimpse of another Beetlejuice, a film that never truly made it to theaters. Number 10. Audiences loved Beetlejuice so much, the film had to give him more screen time. Who here is a Beetlejuice fan? If your hand just went up, you are standing with the very first audiences who forced this movie to shift direction at the last minute. At first, Beetlejuice was not built to take over the entire ending. He came in like a small storm, tore through everything, and was probably only supposed to leave behind the smell of chaos. But the second Michael Keaton showed up, all the calculations started to drift. According to stories told later, test audience reactions to the character were so strong that the filmmakers realized something very clearly: people did not want to say goodbye to him that quickly. So the ending was pushed in a funnier, more mischievous direction, and Beetlejuice got one more appearance, just enough to send people out of the theater, still carrying that half-delighted, half-irritated smile on their faces. Even off the screen, Beetlejuice behaved exactly the way he does in the movie. He barged in, broke the rhythm, stole the attention, and made the whole story move over for him. Strange, but kind of wonderful, is it not? Number 9. The Day-O scene almost did not make it into Beetlejuice. The funniest thing about movies is that sometimes even the director does not realize which moment is going to live the longest. With Beetlejuice, that moment is the Day-O scene. A perfectly normal dinner party suddenly turns into a possessed musical number, everybody getting yanked out of their chairs, arms and legs, moving like polite puppets who have just gone insane. Looking back now, that scene is almost the soul of the movie. Just mention Beetlejuice, and a lot of people immediately remember the dinner table, remember Harry Belafonte, remember that feeling of laughing while also feeling a little chill run up their spine. And yet Tim Burton once did not believe it would work. He thought the scene was too bizarre, too unpredictable, and he was not sure audiences would go that far with the film. Honestly, I get that feeling. On paper, it sounds like the kind of idea that could collapse instantly. But movies sometimes live on exactly those moments nobody feels sure about. And Day-O is one of those moments. It is not just fun. It also wraps up the whole essence of Beetlejuice: elegant, but decayed, silly, but still a little frightening, chaotic, in a way no other movie can really imitate. Number 8. Beetlejuice looks strange because the effects budget was too small. Not every strange-looking film starts with some stroke of genius from the very beginning. Sometimes it starts with a much simpler reason: not enough money. Beetlejuice is one of those cases. The budget for effects was tight, and that lack of money pushed Tim Burton in exactly the direction this film needed. Instead of trying to make everything smooth, clean, and impressive in the usual respectable way, he went straight the other direction. Rougher, faker, gaudier, more like a B-movie. And thank heaven he did. Looking back now, the beauty of Beetlejuice lives right there. The sandworms do not look perfect. The backdrops, the visual tricks, the transformations all reveal the hand of the filmmaker. But that is exactly why this world has a soul. It does not feel like a polished product scrubbed clean to the point of sterility. It feels like a handmade nightmare built by people with a slightly diseased sense of humor. And somehow, that became the film's signature. Number 7. Lydia Deetz almost had a completely different face. If you tell me now to imagine Lydia Deetz as anyone other than Winona Ryder, I will be honest, my mind just stops. Some roles attach themselves so tightly to one face that you forget they almost belong to someone else. Lydia is one of those. Before Winona Ryder stepped into that black dress and turned this girl into the real soul of Beetlejuice, the role had drifted past a whole list of bright young Hollywood names from that era. Sarah Jessica Parker, Diane Lane, Brooke Shields, Molly Ringwald, and Jennifer Connelly were all mentioned. Juliette Lewis auditioned. And in the surviving behind-the-scenes stories, Alyssa Milano is often described as the runner-up. Number 6. The attacking shrimp scene was saved by an incredibly simple filming trick. You remember the dinner table scene in Beetlejuice? Do you not? How could you forget it when it is one of the film's most unforgettable moments? Those shrimp suddenly spring up and lunge at people's faces, as if dinner has decided to turn itself into a nightmare. It looks bizarre. It feels exactly right for the movie. But the way they saved that scene has the exact kind of handmade film magic I love. Tim Burton first tried a much more direct approach, have crew members hide under the table and throw the shrimp upward. Sounds reasonable enough, but on camera it looked clumsy hard to control, and it did not create that odd blend of funny and creepy the scene needed. Then Dick Cavett suggested a trick so clever it is almost funny. Put the shrimp upside down on the actors' faces, film them falling off, then run the film backward. That was it. And on screen, the shrimp suddenly seemed to come alive. That is the kind of magic old films were so good at. No need to hide the human hand completely. No need to make it perfect. You just needed enough cleverness to turn something silly into something audiences would remember forever. Number 5. When Winona Ryder first met Tim Burton, she thought he worked in the art department. I love the way old Hollywood sometimes creates moments that sound made up. Winona Ryder went in to meet the director of Beetlejuice with a very ordinary picture in her head. She assumed Tim Burton would be older, more serious, the kind of proper director everyone imagines. Instead, she found herself talking to a strange man about Edward Gorey old movies and all kinds of odd things she cared about, and she fully believed he was just somebody from the art or design side of the production. Then, at some point, Ryder asked more or less when Tim Burton was supposed to show up, and the man in front of her said, "Oh, that's me." I love that story because it feels exactly like Burton in a way that is almost impossible to believe. Even his first meeting did not happen in a normal way. No grand Hollywood entrance, no powerful director walking into the room. Just a conversation slightly out of rhythm, slightly strange, and then suddenly, one very important thing clicked into place. Winona Ryder belonged in this world. Number 4. Beetlejuice is not really a children's movie the way many people think a children's movie. Quite a few people have said that to me, and I understand why you might think it. Beetlejuice has a playful look, cartoonish ghosts, and all that mischievous energy that makes it seem like it is just a slightly weird Halloween movie and nothing more. But that is what memory often does to old films. It sands down the sharper edges. It makes everything softer. And with Beetlejuice, memory has softened this movie quite a bit. You only have to re-watch it with older eyes to see immediately that it is not nearly as innocent as people remember. This movie has that very specific late 80s flavor, still fun, yes, but underneath it, there is a streak that is dirty, sneaky, and at times much sharper than the surface suggests. Just because it carried a PG rating does not mean it was truly a gentle ride for children. There are lines, suggestions, and ideas about death, sexuality, and adult coarseness that many of us heard as kids and just let drift by. Then you watch it again later, and suddenly it hits you. Oh. So this movie had a mean little streak in it all along. Number 3. Winter River does not actually exist. You may have once thought Winter River was a real place somewhere in New England. The covered bridge, the little road, the house sitting there as if it had stood in that spot for 100 years. Beetlejuice sells you that feeling beautifully. But the truth is, the kind of old Hollywood illusion I adore, that town was stitched together from 2 different places. The exterior of Winter River was filmed in East Corinth, Vermont, but most of the interior work was built on a studio lot in California. In other words, the place you remember as one complete town was really an illusion assembled from wood paint light and camera angles. And the funny part is, that feels incredibly right for Beetlejuice. A film about spirits trapped between 2 worlds, taking place in a setting that is itself half real and half invented. Number 2. The original idea behind Beetlejuice was to flip Poltergeist upside down. Ghost stories usually follow a very old, very simple rule. The living move into a house. Ghosts appear. The living panic. The audience sides with the living. Beetlejuice looked at that rule and flipped it right over on the table. Here, Adam and Barbara are the ones being invaded. They are the ones trying to hold on to their home. And the Deetz family, in truth, are the force that storms in, rearranges, everything, destroys the peace, and turns the house into something unrecognizable. Maybe that is why Beetlejuice never really feels like a normal ghost movie. It steps in through a familiar formula, then snaps that formula in half before you even notice. And the funny thing is, the biggest irony of Beetlejuice is not even in the movie. It is in the fate of the movie itself in real life. Number 1, Beetlejuice became a legend, but it still has not been added to the National Film Registry. This is the one fact that is hardest for me to swallow. Beetlejuice is not the kind of film people loved for a moment and then forgot. It has lived far too long in American culture to be dismissed as an old craze. It began as a feature film, then gave rise to a cartoon, made its way to Broadway, and still had enough pull to bring audiences back to theaters for a sequel more than 30 years later. And yet, even now, Beetlejuice is still one of those films the National Film Registry has not officially called up. To me, that feels both strange and a little unfair. And maybe that is very Beetlejuice too. A movie that never asked permission to become immortal. It just slipped into people's memory, stayed there, and smirked. But honestly, I still want to hear that title called. Not because it needs saving, because it deserves it. And maybe that is what I love most about Beetlejuice. Not just that it almost had a different title, once had a darker draft, or hid all sorts of strange details people are still digging up even now. What truly gives this movie such a long life is that it never stayed still on the screen. It lives in the memory of several generations of viewers, in late-night reruns, in Halloween costumes, in arguments over which scene was the craziest, and in that very specific feeling you get when an old movie still has enough life left in it to look at you and smirk. So after all that, which fact knocked you back the hardest? And the first time you watched Beetlejuice, what was the one thing that stayed in your head the longest? Come relive the memory with me and with a lot of other viewers down in the comments. And do not forget to subscribe so you can stay with me through this series, revisiting classic films.